During the 1950s, yours was a very busy practice, I believe, and you specialised, as you mentioned before, in maritime law, you were one of the few, and also you had a busy equity and commercial practice. I understand, or at least I'm quoting someone here, that you were engaged in all the important cases for the Petty Sessions Courts, ranging from there to the Privy Council. So you must have been in demand early on.
Well, yes, I was lucky. I was lucky in the maritime work because I was, as I said, I was a brand new silk when I went to the Privy Council, my first Privy Council brief in 1964, 54. And that gave me an enormous advantage, but then I had a couple of lucky wins. You've only got to have a few lucky wins and the door's open.
Are there any cases from the 1950s that you fondly recall where you felt you were particularly effective?
Well, nearly all maritime collision cases. We haven't had a decent collision in Sydney Harbour for years, but there used to be a good collision about once a year in Sydney Harbour, ships cutting across the heads, shortcut but those are the ones that I would remember best.
Conversely, were there any cases that you felt disappointed about, you felt you hadn't given your best or things went against you?
No, this sounds arrogant, but I'd say no.
Generally speaking, then, cases played out the way you foresaw they would?
I suppose I'd have to say that, yes, but I was lucky in that sense that I followed Barwick's example, not teaching, but example, mastering it, get mastery, get on top of it, and then you can run the rings around somebody who's far more experienced and more learned because you've got a greater mastery of the facts and the law.
When did you take silk, Sir Laurence? You couldn't have been in practice for too many years before you took silk.
Yes, I think I took silk in 64. I went on the bench at the end of 65.
So only a very short time as a silk.
63, yes. I know I was due to go to the Privy Council the following January, and I'd arranged with Lord Reid, who was rather a frightening man, but he presided in most of the Privy Council matters, that I could come on first in the next year with great effrontery. Then junior, but up-and-coming silk, could I get a good place in the list in the next year? He said, right, straight, we'll put you in first. And that was in 1965, I think. I'd been over 3 or 4 times to the Privy Council. I used to go over in January and try and get into the list then, so I didn't waste any of the court time in Sydney, actually.
I was going to ask you, Sir Laurence, you were actually a silk for just 2 years. Now, many elect to stay on as silk and to continue a leading practice. Why did you opt to become a judge? You were obviously awarded the appointment of a judge of the Equity Court in 1965. Some I've interviewed went onto the bench for financial reasons. Was that ever a consideration for you?
No. No, the significant thing was the judicial position, the thought of being a judge. My father had been a judge, and of course I had 4 children, and the bench in those days had the advantage of financial security, had a regular salary and a pension, status, and I suppose respect of your colleagues, respect of the others involved in the law. It's sort of a combination of positive influences or attractions.
Before you went to the bench, you were involved in the Voyager inquiry?
Yes, that was a high watermark in many ways in maritime inquiries, and I had a huge advantage there because Norman Jenkin was offered the brief that I got in the end. The Navy Board had decided that I should be briefed to represent the Navy, which was very high. But I'd already accepted a brief to appear for the family of Duncan Stevens, the captain of Voyager, and so I stuck to the obligation. I had already accepted the other brief, so I said no to the Navy. So then they briefed Norman Jenkin, who was far, far senior to me, and he didn't know at the time. He'd been very uppity. I think he discovered then that he was their second choice. But anyway, I was briefed for the Navy, for Duncan Stevens, Norman Jenkin for the Navy, and Jack Smythe, who was my mentor in many ways in courtcraft.
I believe he was a master cross-examiner, regarded as the best in his time.
He was, yes. Dry, sardonic wit. He had no heart, so to speak. He didn't feel sorry for the witness. He didn't, but you couldn't help listening, feeling sorry for it as he carved them up. And I was able to feed a lot of information into Smythe, who was appearing to assist, about the Navy practices and what records they'd be keeping and so on. And I gave him the ammunition and he fired it off. And meanwhile, it was the old tactic. There were two ships and the Crown. The counsel assisting was Norman Jenkin. Smythe was for one ship and I was for the other ship. So my tactic obviously was to line up with Smythe, who was the more influential of the two. And rather than wanting to keep all of my material myself, I would feed it to him and he'd use it then. And he did a lot of the spade work for me, in the sense of making the case that this was Melbourne's fault, not Voyager's fault.
Actually, I just wondered when you were saying that then, how much in the way of tactics and strategy do you think you consciously absorbed from during your time in the Navy that flowed over into the way you went about preparing your cases?
I don't think much knowledge of tactics, but men and affairs, I'll put it that way. The way people react, and after all at the bar, it's all so much turns on the way in which the witnesses react and the judges react. And I think my Navy experience was very valuable there. In experience of men and affairs, I'll put it that way. We didn't talk about women, it was men and affairs. That was of enormous value to me. Human nature, look, it's all about human nature, really. That's why I've loved my time since I retired as a mediator. It's all about human nature. And human nature was always what I saw as the golden thread, if you like, through the law.